Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be reviewing the Anastasia Subculture palette. Now I do know there's been some drama circulating in reference to the performance of this palette. I personally am a huge fan of the Anastasia Beverly Hills line. I think that she makes really nice, good quality products. I'm not sure if there was an oversight with this one, if there's been a change of ingredients, or if there is a good batch and a bad batch, which is one of the theories that I did here. But I am going to give this palette a fair shot on my page and of course share my honest review with you guys. I try not to read or watch too many videos before I do a review because I don't want those opinions to affect my own. But there has just been a ton of information, so it's kind of been unavoidable, especially if you are in the beauty community. So I do know some of the concerns that other people are having with this particular palette. So I'm just going to test out some of those theories and see if I have any similar issues. So this is what the palette looks like. Of course, I'm going to be sharing some swatches. So there are 3 shimmer shades in this palette. 2 of them are like very metallic-y and 1 is more muted. And then there are 11 matte shades, which I really liked. And I also like that there's a mixture of cool and warm shades. Sometimes you find palettes that are just strictly cool or strictly warm, and this one does have a nice balance. Another reason I was intrigued by this palette is because it is not the traditional neutral palette. It does have a few different pops of color. You guys can see there is this turquoise shade. There's also like an olivey green shade, and this one is more of a hunter green, mustards, browns, and there's a nice bit of variation. So you guys can definitely play around with this and achieve some really pretty unique looks. The outside of the palette also has this velvet texture, which is exactly the same as the Modern Renaissance. And enough about just my overall observations. Let's jump into some of these swatches and see how they perform on the eye. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of the Kat Von D. This is the Lock It Concealer and Corrector. I like to use this sometimes when I just want to blank my eyes out. So the first shade I'm going to jump into is this mustard shade. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of Edge, which is this one right here on the end. I'm adding that right into the outer portion of the eye. And I'm doing the same on the other eye. I'm just using a Smith 232 brush. Pigmentation is very similar to the other Anastasia shades. I do notice a little bit of kick in the palette, but I haven't noticed any fallout on my eye just yet. It's not as yellow as I expected it to be. It's kind of interesting. It's a yellow shade that turns into like a mustardy brown. So I'm not sure that if it's oxidizing. Now I'm just going in with a MAC, oh my god, I can't even read the numbers. Oh, 217 brush, and I'm just gonna grab a little bit of New Wave, which is this shade right here. Okay, so I do notice that New Wave does have a little bit more kick than Edge. Edge has very little. New Wave, when I stuck my brush in, I did notice that some of the eyeshadow did kind of, oh, it's a little bit, yeah, is a little excessive with the fallout. So I definitely see the concerns that other people are having. Okay. So let's continue. So I'm just going to start by applying this shade right into the crease area. So what I'm doing to get the eyeshadow out, I'm literally just putting the brush into it one time and just tapping off the excess, compared to other palettes usually give it a swirl. I think that might be the way to use this palette. I don't know. I don't know if there's just, it feels like there's just like a lot of pigment. I definitely noticed the difference in the formula between this and the other Anastasia palettes. But since, like I said, I came into it kind of like knowing what some of the issues were, I'm just trying to like navigate around them. But if I hadn't known, I definitely would have kicked up a lot more product because I would have been using this one the same way that I do with any other palette. And now I'm going to go into Roxy, which is this peachy pink shade on the end. So I'm getting a little bit of kickback. Now I'm just going to start packing this all over my lid. Pigmentation on these is really nice. I'm also not noticing any fallout on my face. I feel like the mustard shade kind of got lost in this look. So I think I'm going to jump into All Star and just try to add a little bit of that. I feel like the mustard shade might be a good transition color if you're doing something a little bit more neutral, but since I decided to go left with it, I think that I'm going to have to just add something else into that outer crease. So I'm going to go into All Star, which is this shade right here. So yeah, there is a lot of product pickup on the brush itself. So I'm just going to add a little bit of the shade to the outer portion of the eye. Then I'm just using a clean, fluffy brush to blend everything out. I'm going to go back into New Wave and just apply a little bit to my lash line. I honestly am not having the same issues as some people. I know that there's like some creasing issues as well. I personally am not having that particular issue. After I apply New Wave, I'm going to go back into All Star, and I'm just using this on a flat definer brush. So the pigment is very intense with these. So if you are going to purchase this palette, you want to remember that a little bit goes a long way. So I'm just grabbing a little bit of this on my brush. There's little to no fallout on this metallic shadow. So this is basically all I wanted to do on the eyes. I just wanted to keep it simple. I wanted to test out a few of the shades and a few of the different finishes. And this is the look I came up with, just something simple-ish. It's kind of like a grungy look. I'm just gonna throw on some lashes and a lip and some mascara, and I will be back to tell you guys how I feel about it. But first, let's jump into some swatches. So the first shade we have here is Cube. It's an iridescent shade. It has some pink and lavender undertones. It doesn't swatch too great on my skin, but if you use a wet brush, it will intensify that pigment. But I just wanted to show you a straight swatch. The next shade we have is Dawn. It's a really nice transition shade, something very light and neutral. Next we have Destiny, which is an olive shade. I think that it's swatched really beautifully. Most of the mattes have a really nice pigmentation. Then we have Adorn, which is a beautiful bronze shade. I think that this is one of the most consistent formulas in the palette. But once again, those metallic shades with using a brush that's just flat, it doesn't always give the best pigmentation. So either using a really tight like pencil brush will give you that pigment, or using a wet brush. All Star is a beautiful, rich cranberry shade. This was definitely one of the shades that caught my eye, and the brush swatch is very similar. Then we have this pretty gray swatch, which is the shade Mercury. And I think that they both swatched really nicely. Those two formulas are also really consistent, All Star and Mercury. Next we have Access, which is this deep turquoise shade. If you look at the desk, you can start to see some of the excess product kind of collect on the desk. Some of the swatches actually picked up after I applied them. So it's just really interesting, the formulation of these palettes. So this is a vibrant peach shade, which is the eyeshadow that I used on my lid. Next we have Electric, which did not swatch well on my skin at all. This is a shadow that I did use in my tear duct. So it just goes to show that some of the shadows don't swatch well, and you just kind of have to like play with them a little bit, because I was not like impressed when I saw the swatches, but I really do like this eyeshadow. Next we have Fudge, which is a rich chocolate shade. New Wave is that vibrant orange shade. This was probably one of my favorites as well. This one also is one that I noticed has a lot of kickback.
So that's just one of, you know, the pros and the cons. Then we have Untamed, which is this hunter green, and it's swatched very similar to the finger swatch. Then we have Edge, which is that mustardy yellow, and it does hold its vibrancy with the brush as well. And the last shade we have is Rowdy, which I think is such a beautiful, deep, deep plum shade. Then you can see some of that product fall out. And this is what the palette looked like after I swatched. You can see some clear indentations in some of the eyeshadows. So the palette is breaking down a little bit faster than most traditional eyeshadow palettes.
Okay, so I threw on some quick lashes. I'm wearing Spellbound by House of Lashes, and the lip I'm wearing is Toast Satin Lipstick by Dose of Colors, if anyone was wondering. Now let's talk about this palette. I definitely have a lot of mixed feelings. So I originally did my makeup first, and then I went in and I did swatches. So doing my makeup, because I was already prepared for the kickback, because I had, you know, heard that that was buzzing a little bit, that seems to be one of the main issues, I was very careful when using this palette. I didn't experience any real issues when it came to blendability. I think that they're pretty consistent compared to their other shadows. I think that these might be slightly drier. I'm not sure exactly what the ingredient is that's in this palette that isn't in the other ABH palettes, because her mattes are usually more creamy. I haven't experienced any issues with creasing or any lines or any parts of my eyelid that didn't want to pick up the color. I think that it went on pretty evenly. Like I had said, the shade Edge, which I think is a really nice grungy mustard shade, isn't the best for transition when you're trying to go for something a little bit lighter. So I just applied other shadows on top and I made it work. I think if you're a little bit more fair, it'll show up better on your skin tone, but I think on my skin tone it might have oxidized a little bit, so it didn't look the way that it should have looked, or the way that it did look in the pan. So I like the tones in this palette. I like that it's not a traditional neutral palette. I feel like we have a lot of those on the market, so I definitely appreciated them going a little bit left when it came to selecting the shades in this palette. I also really like that it's primarily matte shades, because I feel like at this point, if you are a makeup lover, you have so many eyeshadows by now, and most of them probably have a lot of shimmer finishes. So the fact that there was a nice variety of matte shades in this palette was something that I really liked. So the price of this palette is $42, which is very standard for ABH. It's $3 an eyeshadow. She has some of the best eyeshadows in the market. So the price, if you are a fan of her brand, is very standard. Now, my issue with this palette is this quality is not the same. I honestly, at the beginning when I first started using the shadows, the kickback, I'm like, oh, it's not too bad. You know, I've experienced worse. But when I started doing the swatches, that's when I really started noticing that kick. Because that's when I was trying to build a nice amount of product either on my finger or on my brush. And that's when I started realizing that there's definitely an inconsistency with these shadows. So Cube, Electric, and Adorn, which are the three like metallic-y shimmer finishes, didn't give me too much of an issue when it came to the kickback. But the 11 other matte shades were very, very powdery. Meaning you're gonna go through this palette very quickly unless you use a very light hand. Now, is it the hardest palette to work with when it comes to applying? It's not. It's just something that you have to keep in mind if you really want this palette. Because like I said, I do think that it's a unique palette. I don't think that it's a standard neutral palette. If I did, I would just be like, skip it. There's so many others on the market. But if you really love this palette and you really like the color scheme and you really want to purchase it, it's not a terrible palette. You know what I mean? Like, you're still going to get a good use out of it. You're still going to be able to create a nice amount of looks, but you are going to run through the palette a lot faster. Something else that was interesting with the palette, although I did experience a lot of kickback with the shadows in the pan, I didn't have any fallout on my face, like at all. I didn't even wipe under my eyes. This is just the way that they look. Now, I did expect to have some fallout because of how much kickback there was, but there wasn't any fallout on my face, which was really interesting. Now, I did dust off my brush before applying it to my lid, which could have eliminated, you know, that entire problem. So I just feel like I have really mixed reviews about this palette. And I'm usually very like yes or no when it comes to a lot of things. I'm either like, I'm really into that or I'm not. But with this palette, like there are some things that I really like about it and some things that I'm just not crazy about. The quality is still high, but I'm just not a fan of the super matte eyeshadows from ABH. I really like her original matte formula. You're still gonna get a lot of pigment and you're still gonna get a nice color payoff, but you just have to work with this palette different. That's something that you have to decide if you want to, you know, invest the extra time and kind of like working with this palette, because it is a beautiful palette, but it definitely takes some finesse. So this is my full review on the palette, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts below if you like this style of video. I don't know, I feel like I'm ending this video, I'm like kind of sad because I kind of went into it not really expecting to like the palette. And then I used the palette and I really liked the palette, and then I did the swatches of it and I was like, oh my god, there's so much kickback. So I'm just so torn with how I feel. It's not the best and it's not the worst. It's not Anastasia standard, but it's not the worst palette, you know, that I've used. You can still achieve a ton of looks, very bold, beautiful looks, but you're gonna have some issues. I'm sitting here looking at it and I'm just like, damn, it's such a nice palette. But those are my final thoughts, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts below if you like this style of video, if you personally would purchase this palette or not, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.